Can you all hear me? Well, yeah, start off by saying thank you again for everyone for giving me this opportunity to come and talk to you all. Thank you all for listening to me. This will be a bit more relevant later, but 2.5 working weeks. Okay, so has anyone here ever wondered why it is that sports cars are such bright colours? So I sort of realised this and I started thinking about it, and it's not just down to the egos of the people that drive the cars, right? Because bright coloured paint has smaller paint particles in it. This gives it a better surface finish. The best surface finish actually comes from a colour most people now know as racing car red. And this gives a better surface finish, it makes less drag, and it makes your car faster. Except that's not true. I made it up. And that was something I once said to somebody once. And I could see as I was telling them, they didn't quite believe me. But they didn't question it. They suspended their disbelief because I'm a scientist, because I wear this white coat. And this is what I like to refer as to the magic of scientists say. Okay? And I've done quite a bit of science communication, and I've come to realize you can pretty much tell anyone anything when you're wearing a white coat. The one thing I actually struggle to convince anyone on is that they shouldn't trust me. Have you ever tried to convince someone not to trust you? It's quite tricky. And I don't sort of like this kind of magic perception of science, you know, and you've got Arthur C. Clarke, and, you know, I do agree with this statement. And I'd say it's wider than that. A lot of people seem to believe that science is magic. They are willing to suspend their disbelief for anyone in a white coat, basically. And I think this is almost the opposite of what science is. For me, science is time. It's someone's time, lots of people's time, coming together to make something a lot bigger than them. And this is very important. Here's why. Here is a time-lapse video of me effectively doing science. Every second of this is an hour of my life. You can watch the days go by in the window in the background. If we wanted to watch this video long enough to represent all of the time I've spent on my PhD, we'd need to sit here for 2 hours. And that would tell you nothing of the 6 years I've spent in higher education and the 11 years I spent in school before that. I'm 27 and I've spent 21 of those years learning, and I'm still learning. It doesn't stop. And I really resent the idea of, you know, the kind of Tony Stark Iron Man idea. There's a guy in his basement basically bashing out discoveries with a light-powered particle accelerator. You know, the whole thing's nonsense. And what I don't understand is people will look at bodybuilders and they'll realize that if you want to put the time in at the gym, you can effectively look like this. But no one ever seems to look at a scientist and recognize the fact that if you put the time in, you could think like that. Because science is time. Science is someone's time, right? Spent poring through books, at a PC, poring through data, looking for things that are interesting, looking for results. And sometimes you'll find a result, right? And you publish this result. And this result, sometimes, you might not know at the time, but your result is a discovery. His sort of your newfound discovery. He's a baby. But with time, that discovery grows. People will look at what I've published, they'll try and repeat my data, they'll build upon what I've done. They will give that discovery time, their time. And with that time, it grows. And there is a lot of time in science. Here's an example. The title of my PhD is very straightforwardly, Shock-Induced Separation of Transitional Hypersonic Boundary-Layers. I think we can all agree, at the very least, that it's quite specific. I put the title of my PhD into Google Scholar, which is kind of like Google for science reports, right? And I got about 1,690 results back. Now, that's not going to be a complete list, but it gives you some idea of how much kind of scientific literature my work sits upon. As a rough idea, each one of those results, each one of those reports represents about a year of combined human life from its authors. So actually, my PhD sits on some 1,690 years. Just my obscure PhD, 1,690 years of combined human life. And with that time, with those lifetimes, discoveries grow to be giants. These are the giants on whose shoulders we stand, not one single person, but combined lifetimes of effort and research and debate. And I think sometimes this is why science can seem so fantastic, so gigantic, so magic. As if any one of these discoveries, was really discovered by a single person. They're not. They belong to all of us. It's kind of like this TED Talk, right? You see the magic 12 minutes of me on stage, if you will. But you don't see the countless hours I have spent rehearsing this talk. You don't see the 6 previous and much worse versions of it. You do not see the silent contributors to this talk who you will never hear from. You don't see the years I have spent communicating science before this, and most importantly of all, you do not see the classroom after classroom of countless school children where I practice that science communication. This talk belongs to them. This talk stands on the shoulders of children. Because science is time, right? That's the point I want to make. It's like this rocket. It doesn't, a rocket scientist, it's not like one scientist designs the whole thing, right? I was sort of trying to come up with analogies of how complicated this rocket is, but eventually I just came to the conclusion that this thing is so complex, it was too complex to describe how complex it was. And if that confuses you, good, because I'm still not entirely sure what it means. And this is why I really don't like the idea of Tony Stark, right? The idea that there's one guy, one super scientist who sort of is just light years in front of everyone else. It's not true. The super scientist is no more real than the Superman. And Hollywood is to real life as scientists say is to science. But the difference is that very few people change their life based on what Superman said. But a lot of us will change our lives based on what scientists say, which is such a nebulous statement. Here's a fun example. Wine, right? So I Googled wine causes cancer, and I got 27,100 results. I Googled wine prevents cancer. I got 53,600 results. And I even Googled wine cures cancer. I got 8,910 results. Do you know what conclusion I reached? I thought about this, and as a scientist, my opinion is that Google rounds its search results to the nearest 10. But the trouble is, it gives the impression that in science, there's two sides of science, black and white, 2 sides of science, one that thinks wine causes cancer and one that thinks it prevents it. But really, this has nothing to do with wine, because wine causes cancer should really be alcohol causes cancer. Or to be a bit more specific, consuming ethanol in quantities greater than your recommended daily allowance could significantly increase your chances of getting certain types of cancer, including, but probably not limited to, throat, stomach, bowel, liver, and breast cancer. Which is actually a huge oversimplification of a massive body of scientific literature, which I'm not going to read to you, but ultimately comes to us as scientists say wine causes cancer. And then you think, okay, fine, I'll drink less wine. But what if wine prevents cancer? Well, wine prevents cancer should really be photolaxins prevent cancer, or to be a bit more specific about that as well, 3,5,4-trihydroxytranstilbane is found by some studies to delay certain types of cancer. Which is also a massive oversimplification of a huge body of scientific research that looks like this. And that comes to us as scientists say wine prevents cancer. And so, okay, well, so do I drink less? Do I drink more? It's a bit confusing, right? You see, really, what's going on is that wine contains both alcohol and photolaxins. Wine both causes and prevents cancer at the same time. It's quite complicated, but often very complicated arguments get massively oversimplified in order to communicate lifetimes of research and debate quickly and succinctly. Which is why everything I just said comes to us as both wine causes and prevents cancer. And there are countless examples of this across all kinds of topics that cause misunderstanding, misconceptions, and often to the benefit of people who stand to gain or lose on the backs of these discoveries. Now, for a long time, people got their science like this. But scientific reports were never meant to be a manual for human life. And every time some guy found some chemical in wine that might help prevent cancer, we got that as scientists say wine cures cancer. Now, this was not a good thing. And scientists started to come out of their labs, often into direct sunlight, and talk to people. You know that there is something wrong with science communication when the scientists opt to come and directly tell you about it. And scientists started to engage with the public. largely to try and fix the problems caused by this magic perception of science. But engagement is a two-way thing, right? And as much as scientists engage with the public engaged with science. And what happens? What happens when you engage with science? Well, I think it's great. Because science is time, but it doesn't have to be a scientist's. This 15-year-old boy came up with a test for pancreatic cancer that was hundreds of times better, faster, cheaper than the market leader. This guy invented a $100 3D printer from his bedroom with no university education because he thought it was cool. And this artist came up with a design for a hydroponic farm sourced from used Coke bottles because she wanted to grow vegetables in her apartment without having tubs of dirt. None of these people are what you might consider to be scientists, but look at what they achieved with their time. You don't have to be a bodybuilder to go for a run. You don't have to be Mary Curie to do science. I will never be the next Peter Higgs. But it doesn't matter, because even Curie's and Higgs's discoveries are so much bigger than them, made giant by the time of everyone else. And this is it, right? This is all a scientist really is, someone who gives their time to science, giving time to building giants. And those giants have changed the world and will always change the world. Think of your life without a mobile phone. Think of your life without a computer or the internet. Think what the world would be like without antibiotics, without the wheel, without fire. See, really, I think we have a choice in life. We can sit on YouTube and watch videos of other people changing the world on our behalf till perhaps we get bored or tired and go to bed. We can go out there and be part of that yourself. Be part of something so much bigger than you. Because in reality, the only difference between me and all of you is this lab coat. Calm down. It doesn't mean anything, right? It's just a coat. If there is something you are interested in, if there is something that you think is important, if there is something that matters to you, get involved. Give some time to science, because we can all be scientists.